You feel it the moment you stop at the red light, that little shudder in the steering wheel, the whole car trembling like it's cold, even when the engine is warm. The needle on the tachometer dancing up and down when it should sit perfectly still. You turn the radio up so you don't have to listen to it. I lived with that shake for 2 years. I paid a shop $340 to chase it, and it came right back. Then I spent a season living outside Nagoya, in a neighborhood where half the men on the street had spent their whole lives fixing engines, and one of them showed me that the shake almost never comes from a broken part. It comes from a single dirty sensor the size of your thumb, and cleaning it takes 15 minutes and costs almost nothing. That knowledge is not new. It runs through a whole culture of Japanese car care that got quietly buried under the modern habit of replacing instead of cleaning. And before this video is over, I'm going to show you the exact method an old mechanic named Fujimoto taught me in his garage, a method tied to a national maintenance law that Japan passed back in 1951. One you can do this weekend in your own driveway with nothing but a can of spray and a rag. You do not need to be young. You do not need special tools. You just need to know where to look. Let me take you back to that garage because, I was the biggest skeptic you ever met. I grew up believing a car was a sealed box. You drove it until something broke, then you handed it to a man who charged you whatever he wanted, and you paid because what choice did you have? When my sedan started shaking at idle, I did what every American does. I searched online, I got scared, and I imagined a cracked engine mount or a dying transmission. The shop replaced 2 spark plugs and a coil, took my money, and told me it might be the fuel system next. The shake went away for a month. Then one morning at a stoplight it came back, worse, and I felt that hopeless sinking feeling you know so well, the feeling that this machine owns you instead of the other way around. So when I ended up renting a small room in that neighborhood near Nagoya, I had no interest in cars. I was there for other reasons. But you cannot live on a street like that without noticing something strange. The cars were old, many of them 15, 20 years old, and every single one of them idled like a sewing machine, smooth, silent, not a tremble at the light. I remember standing at a crossing, one humid evening, watching an elderly man pull up in a white Toyota that had to be older than my own troubled sedan, and his engine was so quiet I thought for a second he had switched to electric. He hadn't. That car just breathed clean. That was the moment my skepticism cracked, because I knew what my car sounded like, and I knew what money I had thrown at it, and here was a retired man in a 20-year-old car with an engine that purred. Something was different about how these people treated their machines, and I had to know what it was. His name, the man who finally explained it to me, was Fujimoto. He was 71 years old, with hands stained a permanent gray, and he had worked on engines since he was a teenager. He didn't speak much English, and my Japanese was clumsy, but engines are a language of their own, and over a few weekends in his cramped garage he taught me more than every mechanic I had paid back home combined. The first thing he did was wave his hand dismissively when I described all the parts my shop had replaced. He pointed at his own chest, then at his nose, and made a breathing motion. The engine, he was telling me, breathes. And when a car shakes at idle, it is almost never sick. It is suffocating. It cannot get a clean, steady breath of air, so it stumbles. That is the whole secret, and it sounds too simple to be true. So let me explain exactly what is happening, because once you understand it, you will never look at that shake the same way again. Your engine needs a precise mix of air and fuel to run. When you are driving down the road with your foot on the gas, the throttle is wide open, plenty of air rushes in, and small problems get washed away by the sheer volume. But at idle, when you are sitting at that red light with your foot off the pedal, the throttle is almost completely closed. The engine is trying to keep itself alive on a tiny, carefully measured trickle of air. And that trickle passes through a few small passages and past a few small sensors that are supposed to measure it and control it perfectly. Here is what nobody at my shop ever told me. Those passages and those sensors get dirty. Not broken, dirty. A film of oily carbon, black and sticky, builds up over the years on the throttle plate, inside the idle air passage, and on the little idle air control valve that meters that trickle of air. As that gunk builds, The trickle becomes uneven. 1 second the engine gets a little too much air, the next second a little too little, and that unevenness, second by second, is exactly the shudder you feel in your steering wheel. The car isn't dying, it's choking on 20 years of grime, and grime can be wiped away. But understanding the cause was only the beginning, because what Fujimoto showed me next explained why this simple truth had been hidden from me my entire life. You have to understand something about how Japan treats a car, because it is nothing like what we grew up with. In 1951, Japan passed what became known as the Road Vehicle Act, and out of it grew a national inspection system that most Westerners have never heard of. The Japanese call it shaken. Every private car has to pass a deep inspection, and for older cars that comes around every 2 years, it is strict, it is expensive if your car is neglected, and it created something remarkable across the entire country. It created a culture where you do not wait for a part to break. You maintain constantly, you clean constantly, you keep every system breathing so that when inspection day comes, your car passes without drama. In America, we were taught to react. Something breaks, you fix it. In Japan, because of that inspection culture stretching back over 70 years, people were taught to prevent. And prevention, when it comes to a rough idle, means cleaning the breathing passages long before they ever get bad enough to make the car shake. Fujimoto put it to me in a way I have never forgotten. He said, in his slow, careful English, that in the West we treat the car like we treat a stranger. We ignore it until it screams. In Japan, they treat the car like they treat an aging parent. They check on it gently and often, so it never has to scream at all. That sentence rearranged something in my head, because he was right. I had never once cleaned a single sensor on any car I had owned in my life. I didn't even know you could. And here is where the quiet, uncomfortable part comes in, the part I did not want to believe at first. Cleaning is not profitable. A shop makes almost nothing wiping a sensor with a rag. A shop makes real money selling you a new part, a new coil, a diagnostic hour, a fuel system flush. Over the decades, as cars filled up with sensors and computers, the entire repair industry in the West drifted toward one comfortable message, that these systems are too complex for you, that when something acts up, the answer is replacement, and that you should never open anything yourself. The knowledge of simple cleaning didn't get destroyed. It just got quietly left out of the conversation because there was more money in your fear than in your understanding. Fujimoto's generation never got that message. They came up in a culture where a mechanic's pride was measured by how long he could keep an engine alive, not by how many parts he could sell. And so the simple art of cleaning the throttle body and the idle sensors stayed alive in garages like his, on streets like that one near Nagoya, in the hands of men with permanently gray fingers who thought it was obvious. So let me show you the exact part, because this is where it gets real. The part Fujimoto reached for first, every single time, sits right where the big rubber air hose meets the engine. It is called the throttle body, and inside it is a round metal plate that opens and closes as you press the gas. When you take that hose off, and you will need to loosen just one clamp to do it, you shine a light inside and you see it. That black, gummy, tar-like coating all around the edges of the plate and on the walls of the bore, that coating is your shake. That is the enemy. On my own car, when I finally looked, the buildup was so thick I could scrape it with my fingernail, and I actually felt sick because I had paid hundreds of dollars to a man who never once looked at this. Now, before I walk you through cleaning it, I want to talk directly to you if you are sitting there thinking this is not for you. Maybe you are telling yourself this only works on Japanese cars, or that your hands aren't steady enough anymore, or that you would never dare open something under the hood at your age. I want you to hear me, because this next part is for you especially. I was 61 when Fujimoto first handed me a rag and pointed under that hood, and my hands shook worse than the engine did. I had never done anything like it. And I promise you, if you can wipe down a kitchen counter, you can do this. There's no computer to touch, no wire to cut, no danger. Every car built in the last 40 years, Japanese, American, European, has a throttle body, and almost every one of them can be reached in your own driveway with your own 2 hands. Here is exactly how Fujimoto taught me to do it, and I want you to follow along in your mind so it feels familiar when you try it. That single law reshaped how ordinary people think, and understanding why that knowledge stayed alive over there while it quietly disappeared here is something I spent a long time trying to piece together after I came home, and eventually I wrote it all down. If you want to go deeper than any single video can take you, I put the full system. Fujimoto taught me every sensor, every seasonal habit, every reason the West lost this knowledge into a book called Japanese Fix, and there is also a more complete companion called Deep Japanese, and the complete reference called The Full System, all available through the link in the description. These are for the person who wants to understand the whole picture, not just fix today's shake, but never hand $300 to a shop for a dirty sensor again. But even with the book in hand, the most important next step is still the same one Fujimoto pointed me toward, first understanding exactly what is happening inside that throttle body and what to do about it with your own 2 hands. First, the engine must be cold and completely off. Never do this on a hot engine and take the key out, or if your car has a button, make sure it is fully shut down. You find that big rubber hose leading into the engine, and you loosen the metal clamp that holds it, usually just one screw with a flathead. You gently pull the hose back to expose that round bore with the metal plate inside. That plate is the throttle. Now you take a can of throttle body cleaner, which costs about $7 at any auto parts store, and this is important. You want throttle body cleaner specifically, not carburetor cleaner, because the modern version is gentler on the coatings inside. You spray it onto a clean rag, not a flood, just enough to dampen it. Then you reach in and you gently wipe that black gunk off the plate and off the walls of the bore. You can push the plate open slightly with your finger to reach behind it. You wipe until the metal shows silver again instead of black. Fujimoto used an old toothbrush for the stubborn corners, dipped lightly in the cleaner, working in small circles, patient, never forcing. It came off like grease off a dirty pan, and when I saw that silver metal appear under all that filth, I understood in my gut why that old man's car idled like silk. That alone, cleaning the throttle body, fixed the shake on more than half the cars I have done since. But there is a second part, and this is the part that separates people who know from people who guess, because the throttle body is only one of the breathing passages. There is also that small idle air control valve I mentioned, the little device that meters air when the throttle is fully closed, which is exactly the situation at a red light. On many cars, it sits right there beside the throttle body, held by 2 or 3 small bolts. Fujimoto would remove it, and inside it, he would find the same black gunk, sometimes worse, because that valve handles all the air at idle and gets the dirtiest. He cleaned it the same gentle way, spraying the cleaner, wiping the passage, working the little pintle inside carefully until it moved freely again. On the cars where the throttle body alone didn't fully cure the shake, this little valve was always the answer. But even that was not the deepest layer, and this is where Fujimoto lowered his voice, because he was about to tell me the thing that most mechanics in his own country had started to forget. There is one more sensor in that breathing path, and it is the most delicate of all. It sits inside that big rubber hose between your air filter and the throttle body, and it is called the mass airflow sensor. Its job is to measure exactly how much air is entering the engine, and it reports that number to the computer, which then decides how much fuel to add. If this sensor gets even slightly dirty, it lies. It tells the computer there is less air coming in than there really is, and the computer adds the wrong amount of fuel, and your engine stumbles and shakes at idle even when the throttle body is spotless. Now here is the part that makes people ruin their cars. That sensor has a tiny wire or a tiny plate inside, thinner than a human hair, coated in a special substance from the factory. If you touch it with your finger or wipe it with a rag or spray the wrong cleaner on it, you destroy it, and then you really do need a new one. This is exactly why the industry loves to sell you a replacement, because so many people either never clean it or clean it wrong and kill it. Fujimoto's method was the gentlest thing I have ever seen a mechanic do. He would remove the sensor, usually 2 small screws, and he had a specific can labeled Mass Airflow Sensor Cleaner, which costs about $9, and is made for this one job. He would hold the sensor over a cloth and spray the cleaner across that delicate element from a distance, never touching it, never scrubbing, just letting the spray carry the dust away. 10 or 12 gentle bursts. Then he set it down and let it air dry completely, never wiping it, before putting it back. That was it. And I watched a car that had shaken for months go dead quiet at idle after that single act. The first time I did all 3 of these on my own sedan, back home in my own driveway, I sat in the driver's seat with my heart pounding, and I turned the key. The engine caught, settled, and went still. Perfectly, beautifully still. The tachometer needle sat like it was painted in place. I put my hand on the wheel, and there was nothing, no tremble, no shudder, just a low, steady hum. I actually laughed out loud, alone in my car, because for 2 years I had believed something expensive was broken, and the answer had been 15 minutes and $16 of spray. But I promised you a secret finale, and this is the one I have been holding, because it is the piece that ties everything together, and it is the piece almost nobody in the West has ever heard. Cleaning the sensors fixes the shake today. But Fujimoto taught me how to make sure it never comes back, and it comes from an old habit rooted in that same inspection culture, a habit written into the maintenance rhythm that Japanese drivers absorbed after that 1951 law. He called it the seasonal breath. The idea is beautifully simple. Twice a year, at the change of seasons, when you would rotate your tires or check your fluids anyway, you take 5 minutes to do one thing. You do not tear anything apart. You simply pop off that big rubber intake hose, shine a light into the throttle body, and give it one quick wipe with the dampened rag before the gunk ever has a chance to build into a shake. Fujimoto had done this on his own cars for over 40 years, and here is the proof that stopped me cold. He drove me to a friend's shop where a mechanic was pulling apart the engine of a neglected car, and the throttle body was black as coal, choked solid, at only 9 years old. Then he had me look at the throttle body on his own car, which he had bought new in the 1990s. It was clean, silver, barely a shadow of buildup after nearly 30 years, because twice a year, without fail, he gave it that seasonal breath. The buildup never got the chance to accumulate. His engine never once shook at a light in 3 decades. That is the whole thing. That is the knowledge those men on that street carried without even thinking it was special. The shake is not decay. It is neglect of the breath, and you can reverse it in an afternoon and prevent it forever with 10 minutes twice a year. Think about what that means for the money in your pocket. The average shop visit for a rough idle in America runs somewhere between $200 and $600, and half the time they replace parts that were never broken, and the shake comes back because the real hose, the dirty breathing passages, was never touched. I know, because I was that customer. I handed over $340 and drove away with the same shudder. And the actual cure was a $7 can of throttle body cleaner, a $9 can of sensor cleaner, a rag, and the knowledge that had been kept alive in a cramped garage near Nagoya by a 71-year-old man who thought it was too obvious to mention. I want to be honest with you about something, because I sat with this for a long time after I came home. Nobody hid this from you out of some grand conspiracy. It is quieter and sadder than that. The knowledge simply stopped being profitable to share. As cars grew more computers and more sensors, the whole industry found it easier and more lucrative to tell you that everything under the hood is a mystery, that you should be afraid to touch it, that the only safe move is to pay a professional to replace whatever the machine flags, and a generation of us believed it. We forgot that an engine is, at its heart, a thing that breathes, and that keeping it breathing clean is something a careful person can do with their own hands, the way people did for 100 years before us. The Japanese never fully forgot, because their inspection culture wouldn't let them. Every 2 years that shaken inspection reminded them to prevent instead of react, to clean instead of discard, to treat the car like the aging parent Fujimoto described instead of the ignored stranger we made of ours. And now that knowledge is in your hands, the same as it was placed in mine, and you can decide to be the kind of person who keeps a machine alive instead of the kind who pays to be told it is dying. So this weekend, If that shutter greets you at the next red light, I want you to remember the silver metal under the black gunk. Remember that your engine is not sick, it is suffocating, and you know how to let it breathe again. Remember the old man's white Toyota idling silent after 20 years, not because it was a better car, but because someone cared for its breath twice a year, every year, without fail. We are the people who sense that the honest, simple answers were quietly buried under the complicated, expensive ones, and who are stubborn enough to dig them back up. That is who you are, or you would have clicked away 10 minutes ago. You would rather understand your machine than fear it. You would rather spend $16 in an afternoon than $300 in your dignity. And every time you recover one of these forgotten methods, you take back a little bit of the independence that got sold away from all of us. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean this specifically. When you pull off that intake hose and shine your light into the throttle body for the very first time, come back and tell me in the comments exactly what you saw. Was the metal silver, or was it black as coal like mine was? Tell me how many years old your car is and how bad the buildup looked. I read these, and I promise you the answers will shock people who think a newer car is a clean one. And if something in you stirred while I described that street near Nagoya, that quiet, that care, then walk with me. This channel is a small gathering of people recovering the honest methods the modern world traded away for convenience and fear, one forgotten practice at a time. Stay with me, because next I am going to show you the thing Fujimoto did to his fuel every single time he filled the tank, a 15-second habit that kept his injectors clean for 30 years, and that not one person at your local gas station will ever tell you. Let that engine breathe, and come back for the next breath of forgotten wisdom. Everything you saw here is just the overview, but the full step-by-step method is waiting for you inside the quiet wisdom circle. In there you can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself, no robots. And you won't be alone. So many mindful folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen, and you can cancel any time. No risk at all.